everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits. And today we're going to go back in time and go on this leave no dye behind journey with colors I've been collecting for the last third quarter of 2025. But now let's go back in time because I filmed some clips along the way to explain just the kind of stuff that goes into this bottle. I have some leftover dyes here, acid dyes in the cups, on spoons and foam brushes. And I'm going to rinse everything out and put it in a container to then see what all my average leftovers look like once I fill this up. This is now the third time that I've filled up this bottle to dye up and see what the average colors look like. And it's not a good average of all the colors that I use in the span of time because I don't always have leftovers, especially if I'm not using liquid dyes. But sometimes I do, and it's really fun to see what we get and to play with a mystery color and pick a technique for a mystery color. We do have a little bit of dye leftovers. I'm actually going to, I guess, dispose of these. And by disposing of them, I mean they are gonna go into a mega leave no dye behind container where I've been saving leftover dyes from multiple projects. Now, the dyes I'm adding are diluted from the strength they were, as are, I guess, pretty much everything else in this container. So I'm not disposing of that directly, but now you know kind of what happens with the leftovers. We're mid-November and this container is starting to get full. Maybe I'll have to use it and post a video on like New Year's Eve, like using up the last of my leftover dyes before the new year. That could be fun. I don't know what day of the week New Year's Eve is, but one thing I'm going to do is I have this 0.5% stock solution of Caribbean Blue, and there's like 20 milliliters or something in it. I want to use this bottle for something else, so I don't have a use for those last drops, so I'm literally just pouring that in. Which, who knows if maybe it'll shift everything from sort of the purpley color that we usually get, that warmth, to something more blue. Probably not. Shaking it, it's looking kind of reddish still. Oh, look at it, it is very purple. I'll have to think about what I want to do with it. But I did get a suggestion, and maybe this is one that I will do next year, is that I should have two containers, one for warm colors, one for cool colors, to sort of split it. But sometimes I combine everything into one cup, so I'm not quite sure how that'll go. But anyway, ooh, maybe we'll scribble dye with it. That could be a fun way to end the year. But anyway. Oh, I'm so excited. So this bottle is filled to the tippy top brim. I could not fit any more liquid into it with leftovers. Sometimes the leftovers were a little more pigmented, sometimes a little bit less. But I thought we would take this dye today and scribble dye onto some yarn, see how far we get. We might not get that far, but I also want to keep layering the color that we're scribbling onto the yarn. And by scribble dyeing, I mean where I'll put the yarn, or I'll put the dye probably into another container that squeezes a little easier, or we'll see how the spigot works. And we'll just draw scribbles and shapes onto the yarn. Let it sit for a minute or two, move the yarn, and do it again and again and again. This is gonna layer the colors on. If the dye is really pigmented, at some point we'll stop, or we may use the whole bottle if it's not that pigmented. But the main thing is to have fun. And so before we jump in, while I have your attention, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Today, we're gonna use my electric hot plate, a 4-inch deep full-size catering steam pan, and we're gonna start dyeing 200 grams of Knit Picks Stroll Fingering Weight yarn. This yarn is 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon, and I am a Knit Picks affiliate, and so if you wanna learn more about this, I have affiliate links in the video description, and I may earn a commission if you make a purchase after clicking on one of the links. So we're gonna start with, as I said, 200 grams of yarn. I've not plugged in the hot plate yet. I never really want to do that until I have water in our pan. So that was 8 cups of water. I will probably need more, but it takes the hot plate a little while to heat up. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it on high for now. And then we're gonna bring over the yarn that I didn't bother pre-soaking. Oh, I forgot. I wanted to add acid. Let's start a little bit low with just 1 tablespoon of white vinegar per 8 cups of water. So if we add more water, I'll add more acid at that same proportion. But because we have this leave no dye behind mixture of a bunch of different colors, there's a big potential that the colors might break. And by breaking, I mean separating. So for example, 2 colors that are probably in there are like fluorescent fuchsia and true black. Those are both colors that the true black will strike a little faster, the fluorescent fuchsia takes more time. And at the pan is a little bit stained. There isn't actually pink in here yet. At the, I guess, the concentration of acid we have in here, the pinks may strike a little bit, but not too much, and the blacks with heat probably would. And so what we could see is 1 color where we just add the dye on, and then a second color. In theory, we could see a second color as the halo when the dye spreads. Now, I do think I want a little bit more water in here. I already added a tablespoon of water to this jar, so that way I could add liquid at the same proportion that we had in there already, and I have that set aside in case I need it, because maybe if we end up deciding to dilute our dye, then then I may want to use that liquid. So we'll see how it goes, but I need to let this warm up, and it might take a little bit. But I want to show you, oh, a drop came out, just how full this container is. And we have that little drip right there. Ooh, it's looking a little bit black. It's very cool toned. I'm seeing those purples. The average always tends to be a purple. And maybe I'm seeing a pink halo. I don't know yet. But this is the first little like look that we have at that color. I may need to transfer it into another container, but we maybe will be able to do something. You know what? I changed my mind. I want to see what this color is, and while we're heating up, there's no reason why I can't take this container, just do a little bit. I'm going to want to move it because you can see this container. Ooh, that's a very pretty grape color is what it's giving. But I'm not able to squeeze very much of the liquid out at any given time. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna grab a squeeze bottle that has a bigger opening, and I don't think I need to dilute the liquid at all. Now we have a liter of this dye total, and you can see just how little we took down. I think we fit a little over 100 milliliters in here. But now I can go a bit heavier with our scribbles than what I did before. And as we heat up, which we're seeing some steam over there slowly, as we heat up, we'll be able to see what kind of halo we get over there. So I'm gonna zoom in right here, and we'll wait a little over 10 minutes just to see if we notice anything. Aha! We have some color spread. I'm seeing some blues show up in the background. And actually, not just that, up here I see a hint of little pink. I don't know if it's showing up on camera. I definitely see it in person. And maybe there's some more pinks sort of spreading through. We'll see when we flip the yarn. But that's definitely not color from the zip tie. These ones have had a little enough pigment that I don't think the zip ties would bleed at all. And also the placement of the color, I'm not worried about bleeding. Okay, let's go ahead and, ooh, I'm seeing pinks. Let's go ahead and flip. Okay, you can really see that little bit of pink in here. I'll zoom in a moment. Now ooh, and here we really see more of that blue spread. Awesome. Awesome. Now that pink we're seeing is not coming off of the pan. I have dyed a lot of yarn in this pan since I stained it pink and have not seen that pink move. So I don't believe that that's an issue. But in here, we have that light wash of pink, which, to be fair, some of these colors could be a pastel version of our mixture. But given that we also have this little bit of blue, that's definitely color breaking. Just very subtle. On this side, let's go ahead and do some hearts. Why not? I think that whatever colors we end up dyeing in here today, and however like big or coverage or whatever we have, we may see less and less of the breaking. But we could also get a little bit more, and I'll do a little line down here, now that I kind of can be a little more free and heavy with it. But as we layer more and more color, the colors are going to average more and more. And so that's also worth keeping in mind. Oh, the last thing I wanted to add is that things heated up pretty quickly. And so it didn't really require 10 minutes, but I waited just because I had said that I would. One other thing I want to see is that in general I don't want to move it, but I'm curious if I come here and I poke. Okay, this is striking pretty quickly. Like if I poke it, clearly I'm spreading that like dusty purple color out a little bit. You can see the areas that I've pressed that gives a little bit more blending, but the main color that I'm adding is sort of staying in place. I do want to wait a little bit before flipping the yarn, just so that way I know we'll get some average and spread all over. I just don't want it to be too much right away. I adore this color. I don't think I have anything quite like it. But I think I'll just wait about 5 minutes before we flip and start adding more. After 5 minutes, we definitely have more spread. Not quite as much as when I pushed in with the spoon, but I want to flip the yarn again. And the goal with each flip, and it's easier with 200 grams of yarn in the pan, it becomes a little trickier if you have like 300 or 400 grams, is I want to expose the areas that have the most white. And so at some point this might mean I flip the skein of yarn inside out a little bit, especially around the zip tie. It may mean I shift the zip tie. But what it does mean is that we're going to continue to have fun and dye different types of patterns. When drawing my spirals that got bigger and bigger, I finished the first bottle, that first probably 113 milliliters of our combination color. And so I refilled the bottle before doing the next flip and the next side. I think I was going to do stars. I'm just mixing up the patterns that I draw. I like drawing these patterns onto the yarn just because it means that I'm being a little bit more random with the placement. If I'm just doing lines back and forth across, then I'm thinking about it too hard. Some things may be a little bit more regular, and this ends up giving me something that feels more organic. Now, I'm gonna keep flipping and flipping and flipping this until I decide I want to stop. And I don't know where that point will be. After 3-4 flips, I hit a point where normally I might choose that to be a stopping point. But again, I wanted to layer the color more and more. I am okay if we end up with very little of the more pastel area. And we have enough of this. We'll probably dye some tonals with it at some point, maybe to compare to what we have here. But I'm just absolutely loving this color and just going slow and scribbling and playing and slowly building up this color. After many flips, it's funny, on camera I think you see the contrast between things more than I do in person. I want to lift the yarn and do like a little check, but you know, there may be some areas with less of the dark, but I think I'm really, really happy with the coverage. I could keep going, but we've used probably 2/3 of the bottle. I have not counted how many times. I have it like a drop left. I'll add that up there. I haven't counted how many times I've refilled the thing, but this is how much is left. And so I think we'll go ahead and do one final project with that last bit of dye so we use it all up. But this I am going to go ahead and transfer onto my stove, maybe. I'll set a timer for 30 minutes because it can stay here for now. Eventually I'll transfer it over to the stove to finish heat setting. As soon as I am ready, can bring over the water I'm heating up over here. But I'm gonna want it to heat for at least 25 more, or 30 minutes from the last time I added dye. That is a number that works well for me. And oh, you know what else we should do? We can finally add more acid. 1, 2, 3, 4. More acid, just to help things set. I love this color so much, but thus far, our average Leave No Dye colors have been very purpley, right? I mean, this one is more cool toned than the last one, which was way more pink, purple, dusty pink toned. But that tends to be where the average goes. And so many of you have suggested that I take these leftovers and sort of split them into cooler toned colors and warmer toned colors to see those averages. And I don't know if that is actually something I'm going to be able to do. Because even though in theory I like that idea a lot of times what happens is I'll be dyeing yarn for the day, and if I have 5 different cups with little bits of dye left in it, I pour a little bit of water into one, swirl it, then pour it into the next cup and the next cup and the next cup. Because I want to add as little water into the container as possible. I want it to be mostly pigment, even though it's still definitely diluted from like what the colors were originally. If I'm trying to separate warmer colors and cooler colors, that's gonna make it a little bit more complicated for me. Just because I'm gonna have to think and make a game time decision. It's like, well, this green is like a brownish green. I guess that makes it warm tone. You know, I'd have to make those decisions, but also have more thought into just collecting the last little bit of dye. And so we'll see what happens as we proceed with 2026, where we end up, how I continue to do this, but it's been a lot of fun to add things into this jar and to have this mystery color. Now, one thing I could do next time is maybe take the mystery color and then say, okay, this is one color. What other colors will I pull from my collection that would work well with it? And so then to not have something that is very monochromatic based on that one color, I could mix it up and pull in other things. So I look forward to hearing what you think down in the comments of this video. Please also give it a thumbs up. I think that we're gonna have to like see where things take me, and by the time this video comes out, I might have already started saving leftovers. I don't know yet, but we will see. All right, I have my 8-quart dye pot here, full, about halfway with water. I did not measure it. And we're gonna take this last bit of dye and add it all in. You can see at the bottom there maybe is a little bit of solids, but really not much. So I'm rinsing it out with a little bit of water, not much at all. Now, I may not bother cleaning the jar because we may let this be a Leave No Dye Behind container for next year, but I'm also gonna rinse this bottle out. You know, there's not much. Why leave any dye behind of my Leave No Dye Behind? Now I want to add some acid. And so my guess is that maybe I have 10 to 12 cups of water. 24 cups would be up there. Maybe 16. Let's go ahead and do 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. If I wanted to see the color breaking super well, I should do this with a non-superwash yarn, but that's not what we're gonna do today. I'm gonna get a dry skein of Stroll and we'll just see what we get. Okay, we've got our dry yarn, just 100 grams of yarn. Now, Stroll is so absorbent, but I'm gonna try to still be really slow as I raise and lower it, and also try to separate it a little bit, because if I have the 2 strands held together, the dye won't get as much in the areas that are touching. And just slowly I'm adding a little more and a little more. Now, I am seeing, like when I have the yarn and then I lift it up, some of the color maybe drains out, leaving something else behind. It's hard to say. It's hard to say, but we are getting definitely less and less color. Like the pigments are binding. But I don't know how much breaking we're gonna get. Sometimes when you see color breaking, you'll see like a color when you first lift the yarn up, and then a color will drain out a little bit, shifting it back a different direction. And it's because like if you have a little bit of blue or something that is gonna bind towards the end, then you can see it come out. But whatever we have left over in here is not that dramatic. And we still have a lot of that main color left. It's just getting like more and more, and I think there are some blues left because when I go in, it feels lavender and then it feels maybe a little pinker. But we still have what looks like a ton of pigment, so I'm afraid to go in with the last bit. And so part of me is like, oh, I should add more acid to try to get more of that in. But I also don't want to add more acid because if I add more acid, then everything's going to strike faster. But yeah, that color is definitely feeling, I don't know. I could have picked proportions where I know that things work for breaking. There are ways I definitely could have done this that would have worked better. But, you know, I'm gonna leave this partially in while I deal with that. Okay, we are back. Ooh, things are clearing a bit. It's definitely feeling pinker, like what's left. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add everything in, and now I'm gonna add a lot of acid. It was just two. Let's add like a ton of acid in here. And the reason for this is I don't know how much it's showing up on camera, but it looks like we have something way warmer and pinker here at this last end. Those are probably some of those fluorescent pinks coming into play. And so I'm hoping that more acid will help some of that come in. And you can kind of see it right there. So I'm gonna set a timer for 30 minutes. The other yarn is almost done heating. I'm gonna turn off the heat and let that cool. So I'm gonna set a timer for 30 minutes and then we'll come back. While we wait for the dip dyed yarn, I'm now gonna turn off the heat on this. Ooh, do I see some breakings? Maybe, maybe not. Turn off the heat on this beautiful yarn. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it here. I would be okay removing it and setting it aside to cool at this point, but logistically, it makes sense to leave it here right now. And we'll wash it once it has cooled completely. But now, it's, 25 minutes in the future. So let's look at the dip dyed yarn. It has been 30 minutes, and there are times with a hot plate. I'm actually gonna both turn it off, but I'm unplugging the hot plate now. There is a hint of pink dye remaining here in the pot. I could leave the yarn in here to absorb that last little bit of pink, but I'm not going to. I do feel more pink there. The breaking is super subtle though. The breaking, I would say the shift and the separation of colors, we do see an increase, a bit of warmth, but, because I think the pastels we would see would still be more gray purple, but it's so subtle, unlike other combinations I've made over the years that intentionally break. So anyway, I'm gonna set this aside to cool completely, then we can wash it, and that last little bit, I'm leaving behind. Let's wash not only our dip dyed, and I still feel like you see the breaking yarn, but also our Scribble dyed yarn. And I hope it wasn't too much of a bait and switch that this is so monochromatic, because the thumbnail of the live stream that I used had a lot of greens in it. And I picked it because it was a pretty Scribble dyeing thumbnail, but oh my gosh. I love, and I'm way more excited about everything because this is so cool toned. And I am still shocked that there wasn't like a dramatic breaking or anything. And this color is stunning. I wish that I had kept more track of all the colors that went into here as I add a little bit of dish soap. It could have been really, really fun to see like a list of all the colors that could possibly be in there, because maybe it isn't that diverse, but also maybe it is diverse. So it's hard to know for sure. All I can say is that this is beautiful, and I would have to think about how I would create this type of cool toned deep purple, and who knows how it'll shift while it dries, but how I would create that in a way that wouldn't split and break if I was doing it myself. And so maybe I would start with like aubergine or royal purple or something, and then add like some yellows to it to like mute it. But it would also need some like navy, so it would be a little more cooler toned. I don't know. What I do know is that we don't have any color bleeding. So I'm gonna go ahead and put all the yarn through my spin dryer and hang it up to dry. As we look at our very monochromatic Scribble dyed yarn, it is very fun. There's contrast, not high contrast, between the light blush pink that we have on the backdrop with the dusty purple overlay. But I want to point out that we do have a few areas on the pastel backdrop that are definitely more cool toned, more blue, versus the pinks that we have mostly overall. Looking at our dip dyed yarn, I feel like we may have 3 levels of color breaking here. We have this pink that is the same, I'll show them next to each other, as the background in our Scribble dyed yarn. We have this grayish color that is kind of what I had called more blue on the other yarn. But then it warms up again as we go into this grayish purple. Like there's a warmth here that disappears here, that reappears here as we were dipping it. And so what is possible is that we probably have some fluorescent pinks in there or something that are the slowest to bind. We definitely have some pinks in there that strike quickly, like deep magenta. And so we may have had those pinks, had something more neutral, and then finished with the others. And that is really, really cool. Now, I am making these guesses based on some of the pigments I knew were in the bottle and the way that things behave. But doing a color breaking where we have an intermediate color, I think it would be hard for me to try to capture that intentionally. And again, this is just a hypothesis, even though, well, I don't know how I would test it because it was like a mystery mixture. But I hope that you're kind of understanding those feelings I have in there. Now, there is a very big difference in between our Scribble dyed colorway and this one, even though they have all the same colors in there. The Scribble dyeing gave us something that is a bit speckly, a little bit more random. If I had continued building on that, those pastel areas would appear less and less and less. And so one way we could use Scribble dyeing to add a little bit more dimension into a tonal yarn would be to dye a yarn a tonal layer first and then Scribble dye on top of that. Because if you could, or the reverse, Scribble dye and then over dye it. Because you can imagine that if we had a deeper color, this would bring some dimension in that would shift where the colors are, or like the intensities, the saturation is shifting in a smaller area and in a way that it wouldn't pool, you'd get more mottled overall. I don't know if that's something I've done specifically, so I'll have to write down and try that this year in 2026. This dye may have been from collections in 2025, but in 2026, we're gonna have so many awesome, fun colors. So please make sure you're subscribed and turn those notifications on. I like to live stream occasionally, and sometimes I plan it and give advance notice. Other times I decide the day of I'm gonna jump on a live. And I actually worked on part of this project during a live stream, which I will link down below. So you can go back and look at that and see the whole unedited process. But you know, if you want to make sure that you know when I go live in the future, having those notifications on are the best way to make sure you know when it's happening. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and this is one of the last colorways I dyed in 2025, and one of the first I'm sharing with you in 2026. We are going to have a year filled with color and yarn, and if you love the yarn I dye, please go and check out my shop, ChemKnits Creations. This is where I have all of the yarn that I dye in my videos. And so you can buy some yarn that's been featured in a video and help support me at the same time. And the whole thing is just really helpful, and I really appreciate all of your support. And the other thing subscribing will do is that when I release my next mystery offering, which at some point there'll be some Valentine's Day announcement, then you can know that it's available. Thank you so much for watching.